guys, I'm Kate. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going over the beta reader feedback I got for Project Blue, my YA pirate fantasy novel, and I'm very high energy right now because I'm just so excited. Also, the backdrop is, I'll show you a little bit more, but I'm in Vancouver, I'm in Canada finally, and that's also part of this excitement. So try not to freak out too much so that I can relay how this whole process has gone, but inevitably this is what's happening. So this round I had 2 beta readers, and these are the first people to read Project Blue, which is still unnamed, hence calling it Project Blue. But I do think because of this process, I'm kind of sort of close to coming up with a name, so that's good. So anyways, Project Blue's actually had 3 readers now, the 2 beta readers and myself. In other videos, I did talk about things that I kind of knew ahead of time in my own reread that I was gonna have to change. And then also the fears that I had going into this, that I was worried about the story, where I was like, I don't know that this is actually gonna work, or I don't know if I did this right, that kind of thing. So we're gonna take all of that plus my beta readers feedback into this whole little moving forward section. That'll be at the end of the video, but right now let's go over the feedback and let's go over the things that all 3 of us agreed on. For a kind of small thing, but does affect the plot, in my story I have flying ships. This is important later, and arguably it's more important that the pirates, some of the main characters, don't have their ship flying right now. It got ruined, the flying part of it, before the story began, but I talk about flying ships and then it never gets brought up again, and there's a chase scene because of course what pirate novel would be complete without, you know, a full-on chase in the waters, and everyone was understandably confused, like, why don't they just fly away? Why don't they fly? Some ships can fly. Why don't they? Good question. Now, in my writer brain, when I was writing this, when I was editing it back, I put in a couple sentences that addressed this, or what I thought addressed the issue. But did it actually address the issue? No. It was things like the captain telling Graham, one of the minor characters that my beta readers loved, so that was nice, telling him that he finally got the supplies he needed to fix the ship. But do I ever say to fix the ship? Do I ever make it clear to anyone outside of the pirate, Graham, and my brain that he's going to use those supplies to fix the ship? Nope. This plot line is very small and it's a little thing to fix, but I do think it'll make the story much more cohesive in ways that the reader can understand. And also, it's just another lesson that I need to learn more about ships. I did do some research ahead of time, but as I was reading it, I was like, oh, well, I know nothing. And especially because what I want to do is have in the first part of the story, Annalisa, the main character, know kind of nothing about ships, but as she gets through toward the end of the story, she's going to learn a lot more about ships. And so I want her to start using some of the terminology along the way, which means that I, the writer, have to learn some of the terminology. I have to learn about ships. It's time. It's time. And I need to fix the flying thing. Oh my god. Moving on to something that I thought was very interesting was that neither reader thought that this novel particularly screamed young adult, which is interesting to me. The only clue they had truly was that Annalisa's age is 16, and so they're like, oh, I guess it's young adult because of that, but it didn't read. They said it didn't read like a young adult novel. I don't totally know what that means. And when I tried to kind of piece through it, I think it's just that the idea of young adult is kind of confusing in general. And it's not helped that all of the other major characters are older than her by a little bit, you know, going up to about 23. And it's also young adult fantasy. And I think that tends to cross the boundaries more than other young adult novels do, especially when you get into the upper age of young adult, but I don't know if this is gonna be a problem or not. And I don't think there's anything necessarily that I want to do to fix that. I like the story as it is. No one complained about it. They were just like, I don't know that this is young adult. So there you go. One reader actually only thought the only reason that it was potentially young adult was because Annalisa's in her head a lot, which I thought was interesting. And I've read enough adult that does do that. So I don't entirely know if that's a bad thing, if it's a good thing. They said that she didn't come across wishy-washy. She's absorbing the information, and I don't know if it focuses on that too much. Who knows? This is the kind of feedback that you kind of gotta let marinate, and I've tried to do that, but I still haven't come up with anything. So I think this is what's so interesting about the beta reader process, is that my other beta reader didn't see that at all. They didn't think she focused on it. They didn't think there was too much narration of her emotions or feelings or anything like that. So when I go in the next round, that'll be something I can kind of see if that's a recurring theme or not, or if it's a problem, or if it's not. One thing that I especially liked was that everyone loved the main characters. I talked in my previous video about how I was so worried about Matias, one of the major characters, that I thought I messed up his characterization because I changed some key information and I changed some key events and the time period that they happen in. I was, y'all, you know, I was so up in this timeline. This frickin' story. But upon rereading, I actually liked Matias too. And I think that my concern was built from before I had revamped the timeline. And so yeah, neither beta reader was concerned about it. They really liked Matias actually, and they really liked all of the major characters, which is good. And they had several minor characters that they liked a lot. Spoiler, spoiler, spoiler on what happens to them. That's such a relief because that was one of the things that I was most worried about. But the other big concern I have is that I'm setting this story up to be a series, and what you always want to do is have the first book have a conclusion that feels like a conclusion, but you still need to set up the rest of the series. And this is especially hard if you want to get things traditionally published. And I don't know if it's the same anymore, but... And so while both beta readers felt that the conclusion was good and they felt fulfilled by the story, which is so important, they were like, you know, immediately after this ending, everything's gonna go to shit, right? Like, you set this up to immediately have consequences. So they felt a resolution within the characters and within the main plot of this story, but they're like, all this shit's about to go down, right? Like, so... And so in that regard, another feedback I got from one beta reader was that they were like, I wouldn't have realized this was coming to the end of the story, except that I saw I only had so many pages left because I'd brought up so many open things and I closed a portion of them, but then another little bit smaller portion needs to stay open and you're not going to get answers to it until later, like series do, and I'm a little bit worried that that balance might be off. But I can't think of a way now to fix that, and I think for this story, I don't know that I want to fix that. I kind of like the idea that everything might go to shit after. Like, that's the ending that I want. You get the resolution of the emotional needs of all the characters, but things can still go to shit. But plot-wise, this does kind of tie into the biggest issue that one beta reader said, and something that I do agree with, but not something that I would have necessarily pointed out myself, which is of course why you need beta readers, why they are so important. And that thing was that I think, like a lot of origin stories, the first third of the story is the character not really knowing what the F is going on. I wanted to make things very clear that everything that's happening to Annalise, the main character, is a result of her own actions. Multiple times, she has a choice that she can make, and there would have been consequences no matter what, but she chose this one very purposefully. And so what's happening now is because she chose this one. So everyone agreed with that. That was a question I asked them after when I was doing these kind of Q&A sessions with them, and I'll get a little bit more into that in a second, but so the first third, he's reading this story and he's like, I just have no idea where it's going. He said he just felt off balance. And I think that's a very valid criticism, and I've had books like that I've read and enjoyed. And he's said the same thing, but he's also had books that he's read and decided not to continue reading them. So he brought up another very valid point, which was that except he'd already made the commitment to me and that he'd already had a timetable for when the story needed to be done by. He doesn't know if he picked this book up in a bookstore and he bought it, would he continue reading it after that first third? And he said that he was so glad he continued reading it because he loved the story it kind of took him on and he enjoyed the conclusion, but would he have made it? That's a very interesting question. Would you continue reading? And I've definitely beta read for people and made a point kind of similar to that, where I've actually had the reverse happen almost, where I've gotten 50% of the way through the story and I'm like, you wrapped up everything. Why do I need to read another 200 pages? Like, all of my questions have been answered. Now I'm going to bring up the origin story again because I think this is kind of a common young adult fantasy trope-ish. Think of Harry Potter, think of Percy Jackson. The only difference is that they have a boarding school or some kind of school that they're going to go to. So the first third, all confusion for them, has a clear and concise answer for the reader. We know what's about to happen. They're going to go to school and then, you know, some of the answers will form or whatever. The character doesn't know that. So you have this first third, but at least as a reader, you don't have that off balance feeling because you know kind of what's about to happen. You don't have that with this story. But I think part of that is pirates and adventure and this kind of fantasy novel. So valid criticism. And for the record, the other beta reader had no problem with this, but she does read more adventure novels. And so she said that that's just true of that genre for her. She likes that kind of thing. So I feel like this is a valid point that he was making. I get why she would still like the adventure novel aspect of it and the I don't know what's gonna happen aspect. I do think though, and this was like a light bulb moment, that I have a way to fix this and fix something that was bothering me. And I think the solution to this is to slowly but surely introduce a major storyline earlier on in the novel. And this is another thing that it's like, you know, those clues that the reader gets, but obviously the characters don't because the readers have a little bit more information. It's gonna be like that, and I think I know how I'm gonna do it, and I haven't written it yet, so I shouldn't be celebrating. But I feel so good, so good. But speaking of those like little hints, we're gonna go ahead and move on so I don't get too excited. I thought it was very interesting what things both of the beta readers did and did not pick up on. And so they did both pick up on some very well placed or purposefully placed, I won't give myself too much credit, points about Matias's character and his background. And that is wrapped up within this novel almost entirely. But there were some other things regarding Annalise's mother and the relationship with her and where her mother might or might not be that I thought were properly placed hints. And I think that they are things that you could guess, but neither reader came up with it. And so looking back on it now, because of course I know the story, I'm thinking maybe you could come up with it, but maybe that's what I want. Maybe I don't want people to know this one thing right away, because with Matias I really did. I full on answer it later. So I like that you can guess a little bit ahead of time as you get more and more hints about his background. But I think with the mom, because we don't actually meet her in this novel, I think it's even better that you don't have an exact clear idea of what's up with her. Gotta keep the reader on their toes. For other little things that need to be fixed, of course, my beta readers did mention the same things that I mentioned, where I have little monikers for my characters like Other Sister, where I forgot their names. That's not great. And of course the actual writing needs to be elevated. I talked in my last video about how there were patches where I was like, oh my god, this is so good. But of course there were tons of other times where I was like, this is trash. So I need to fix that trash and make it oh so good. But the greatest thing for me is that both readers really like the story. And that's what I have enjoyed, because for me, this is the first time I've written something that feels so much like a cohesive story at this point in the whole drafting process. Which is good, which is nice, which I hope means that just in general I'm getting better at drafting, and so the actual story is being revealed to me, the writer, earlier on. I don't know that this is true. This is just the first one where it's been happening earlier, so this will be kind of a fun documentation to see if that's true or not. Ultimately, I was so happily surprised with the feedback I got from my beta readers just this entire process. I don't think that the feedback, the negatives or the positives, were hard to take. I really felt like a detachment from the project. It's like, Project Blue is not me. I was not offended by anything, which is great. And even though I'm super excited to hear the positives that people are saying, it didn't feel like a positive reflection of me. It felt like truly, oh, this is how I'm going to make this story better, which is so good because I think that's what you need. My focus just truly is on telling the best story that I can tell, and I think that is an awesome mindset to be in, and I'm so happy that I am there. And both of my beta readers did such a good job of providing in-depth feedback, like way more than I had asked for, like way more. And they were so kind to both talk to me for like 2 hours when I had a couple questions, and I really drilled them for information, and they were just amazing. I could not have asked for better beta readers. If or when this gets published, I will have a mighty long thank you list. So now let's get on to my plan for the future for Project Blue. The future. If you watch my goals video over June, you will know that I am planning on having draft 3 done in 2 months' time, which means by the end of July, by the end of camp, even though this isn't my camp project, I will be done with Project Blue Draft 3. And thankfully, now that others have read it and given me feedback, I am reaffirmed in not needing ginormous changes like last time. Draft 2 just took so much time because I had all of those timeline errors, and this time I really don't think that there's going to be anything that huge unless I mess something up, but hopefully that doesn't happen. So I do think this is doable even while I'm on the road, even while I'm participating in Camp NaNoWriMo. And I've likened revisions to kind of like doing a puzzle, and I am so excited to fill in the missing pieces here, add a little gloss, and hang this guy up on the wall. He's almost done, I hope. I will be looking for more beta readers once I'm done with draft 3, but I figured that that's not even something that I should be focusing on right now. So more to come on that. Please comment down below and let me know what your ideal beta reader process is, if you have one. If you've beta read for anyone before, do you think there's a difference between alpha readers and beta readers, and what's the other one people talk about? It's not gamma, but is it gamma? Have y'all heard about that? Am I crazy? Comment down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see y'all very soon with a new video. Bye. Am I moving this? I'm moving it. Oops. Sorry. Why is it so loud all of a sudden? Y'all are just gonna have traffic sounds, sorry. Is there a bus? Who knows? Can you see the plane? It's a huge bus. It's like, except that he'd already made the commitment to me